Hi, I'm Patrick Heffernan, the Principal Analyst and Practice Manager for Professional Services here at Technology Business Research. And I'm joined by my colleague, Boz Christoph, and we spent the first part of this week in New York City meeting with some clients. We wanted to share a little bit of what we learned on the trip and also what things have sparked our imagination, our thoughts, where we're going to go in the next couple of months with our research. And so I'll go first, Boz, if that's all right.
Sure, yeah. Of course.
One of the clients we met with had a comment as we were talking about sustainability and we were talking about innovation, and he called it innovation washing, kind of like greenwashing was used in the past, and a way of saying that clients are sometimes spending money on innovation or talking about their investments in innovation without actually doing a lot, which for me set off a little bit of an alarm bell, because we've been talking to a lot of the professional services, IT services companies in the last couple of years about the evolution of their centers, their digital transformation centers, immersion centers, innovation centers, experience centers, whatever you want to call them, and how many of them have told us that they've had clients ask that consultancy to come and set up a little mini innovation center in their own environment. And so I'm wondering now, did that never really take off? What's been the success rate? What's been the way that these companies have measured whether or not that effort was worth it? And as we've seen the evolution of these centers as we've seen this evolution change within these centers, as we've seen all the different ways that the consultancies themselves are trying to evaluate the value of their investment and where it's going to go next, I'm curious as to what's going to happen at the clients themselves, whether or not this was innovation washing or whether or not there's some legs there. So that's one thing I took away from the trip.
Yeah, I think the evolution pieces as well, for me, is certainly a key word, and it's more of an evolution around the partnership model, which was coming forward in a few discussions throughout the week, with the clients that we met in New York, and it was really kind of a continuation, essentially, of some of the changes we've seen with certain systems integrators, certain software vendors throughout 2019 and looking into 2020, from both leadership change at the helm as well as business model changes. So I think kind of putting in that whole circle of evolution of like where the market is heading in, especially in this current environment, is about the discussion kind of like kind of continued essentially from what we have been going into, how SIs are partnering with technology vendors, how are they thinking about realigning by horizontally or going by vertical. What's the happy medium, essentially? That's kind of came up more and more, especially as those ecosystems evolve as well. So I think the evolution, as we think in 2020 and kind of moving into the new decade, I think will be certainly something to keep an eye on, and certainly to raise more questions, because when it comes to evolution, there's also a lot about expectations on each side. How do those partners, how do those growth models evolve, but how do they also do they meet expectations across the stakeholder ecosystem?
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned change, because the second point I took away from it is something we discussed a lot during this trip with everybody we met with, and I think it's a stick with me. It's a little bit hard to explain, but there's a point. I'm actually going to pull together telemedicine and the coronavirus into all of this. So one of the points that we had was about some of the large consultancies, in particular the strategy houses, and how, despite the change that we see for everybody else, they really haven't changed. Their business model has not fundamentally changed over the last 10 years, and we don't think it's going to change over the next 10 years. Despite everything that's happening within the market, despite all the different pressures that are coming from competitors, coming from clients, coming from ecosystem partners, we don't see those firms fundamentally changing the way that they go about doing their business. And part of that, in my mind, is understanding how, as an analyst, you can look at lots of different factors, lots of different change, lots of different disruption, and try and find something that's actually a constant. And the tendency is to say, if everybody is being impacted by all these outside forces and all these pressures, everybody has to change. And yet here's a case where we don't think they actually are going to change. So having the ability as an analyst to sort of think through it that way, that then leads me to the coronavirus and the fact that this may have been one of the last trips that we do in the spring of 2020 because of that. And so I was talking last night with my wife Maureen, who we were talking about teachers and making plans for what happens if schools have to close, and can teachers actually deliver lectures or will teachers be willing to deliver lectures? And then I started thinking about telemedicine, which we've written about extensively in our healthcare IT services practice. And we've talked about what are the impediments to telemedicine, and usually it's because of the either it's a connectivity issue or it's patients who want to have that interaction with the doctors. And so we've always thought of that. Never did I think to myself, well, what if there's a pandemic and it's actually the doctors themselves who are self-quarantined? It's the doctors themselves who need to be able to provide that service because they're the ones that are held back from actually that personal or that in-person interaction. So I think to me, it's a way we need to start thinking. This is a time to start thinking about the outside forces and the factors that are much bigger, much broader, much more, I hate the term black swan, but that kind of thing, and think about how that's going to have an impact on professional services, IT services, digital transformation, all of these things that we're thinking about, the emerging technologies, we're thinking about the changes that's going on, but we're not thinking broad enough, we're not thinking big enough. I guess that's what I came away from it.
Yeah, outside forces piece, actually, it's something that I also kind of another takeaway from the trip. I'll kind of taper it off a little bit. I'm not going to go too much into coronavirus, but I'll try to kind of peg that into what actually we heard from our clients in the discussion about outside forces. Certainly, everyone, kind of like most clients, most vendors know the immediate peers, right? Yeah. But they often ask us questions about who's coming out of the left field. Who should they be worried about that's maybe not on their radar? We keep hearing about the web scalers, right? We keep hearing about and the connectivity, which I think will play certainly a key role, especially when it comes to telemedicine and what now we just discussed. Certainly, a group of vendors like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and the likes are gradually creeping into the services space. And that's something that our clients and their clients often ask us questions about. How do we see the web scalers play? And going to the earlier point about the ecosystem, is it more still about we can play nice with everybody, or we actually creating a competitive threat? Early innings of all those web scalers into the competitive area, still more as partners. But we, as we heard during this past week, and we discussed with clients, we don't exclude the possibility of some of those web scalers actually moving a little bit more aggressively into the services space, possibly pulling the trigger on a large consulting purchase and trying to be, hate to say it, the end-to-end kind of angle, but really trying to create new entry points with new buyers, essentially. And that's, I think, thinking about what's out there, what's out the left field, and how some of those vendors maybe think a little bit differently about their business models. It's an area that we keep a close eye on and we'll continue to explore, and we engage in the conversations with our clients and everybody else in our ecosystem. But so try to not to be as dark as maybe in your view of the outside in, but certainly I think it makes a good bridge to think about.
Excellent. And so we don't know what travel's coming up after this, but we'll try and do this after each one of the trips to kind of share what we took away from it, but also what things we're now going to go off and chase after because of the insights that we heard from our clients and those ideas that have come into our heads. Thanks.
Thank you.